Let me tell you something most people don't understand until it's too late. A truth that often dawns in the quiet, hollow aftermath of a connection that has run its course. Sometimes, it's not the goodbye that hurts. It's the fact that you didn't say anything at all. They were braced for a finale, a dramatic closing scene to a story that had been building towards some kind of explosive end. They had a script in their head, one where you'd follow the familiar patterns, the raised voices, the desperate pleas, the long, winding paragraphs of explanations sent into the digital void, begging for a scrap of understanding. They were prepared for the noise, for the storm of emotion they knew how to navigate, perhaps even how to use to their advantage. An argument can be won, a plea can be rejected. Drama can be managed, but you didn't give them any of it. You denied them the very conflict they were expecting. You just went quiet. There was no dramatic exit, no slamming door. No meticulously crafted final message designed to elicit guilt or one last moment of connection. There were no emotional paragraphs, no last-ditch efforts to make them see the pain they caused. Just silence. And in that void, their entire expectation collapses. It's a form of emotional jujitsu, where by refusing to engage, you use their own force against them. Their prepared reactions, their defenses. Their justifications, all of it, suddenly has nothing to latch onto, and they are left swinging at empty air. This silence, this profound stillness you offered instead of a fight, is so often mistaken for surrender. But it is not. It is not a white flag raised in defeat. It is the quiet, unwavering strength of a bridge that decides it will no longer bear the weight of those who take it for granted. It was your final act of strength. A testament to the fact that you had finally reached the end of your emotional currency and decided to bankrupt the account rather than make one more withdrawal you couldn't afford. People profoundly underestimate the sheer, absolute pain that leads someone to go quiet. They mistake silence for passivity, for emptiness, for a lack of things to say. But it is the opposite. True, meaningful silence is the overflow. It is what happens when the words have become so heavy, so numerous, and so painfully futile that to speak them would be to diminish their meaning. It is the language of the soul that has exhausted all other dialects. It's terrifyingly powerful because it is an open-ended conclusion. It speaks volumes without ever needing a sound. Leaving the other person alone in a theater of their own making, forced to watch a play with no ending, only the haunting echo of what they thought would happen. It transfers the burden of narrative from you, the explicable, to them, the perceiver. This isn't just a reaction. It's a quiet revolution. It is the ultimate declaration that the game is over, not because you lost, but because you have changed the rules entirely and chosen to walk away from the table without placing another bet. The dynamic of any relationship, especially one fraying at the edges, is often a relentless dance of pursuit and defense. You, in your desire to be seen and understood, became the perpetual explicable. You operated under the assumption that if you could just find the right combination of words, the perfect sequence of logic infused with enough emotion, you could bridge the gap between your experience and theirs. You laid bare your heart, your intentions, your vulnerabilities, and your loyalty like evidence before a court that had already predetermined its verdict. Each effort was met not with understanding, but with dismissal, a brush-off, a counter-argument, a deflection that made your truth feel small and inconsequential. Your words, no matter how heartfelt, became mere sound, losing their weight and meaning upon impact. But silence. Silence is different. It is not another sound to be argued against or dismissed. It is the absence of sound altogether. When you choose silence, you fundamentally change the rules of engagement. You remove yourself from the courtroom. There are no more arguments for them to win, no justifications for them to pick apart, no emotional paragraphs for them to use as proof of your dramatic or overly sensitive nature. You create a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. Into that quiet void, their own thoughts come rushing in. The external noise of your pleading stops, and for the first time, the internal noise within them begins. This is where the real work, the work you were trying to do for them, finally begins. Their mind, no longer occupied with defending, rebutting, or minimizing your words, is forced to turn inward. The questions you longed for them to ask themselves suddenly start echoing in the emptiness you left behind. Did I go too far? What did they actually mean when they said they were hurt? Were the signs of them pulling away there all along, and I just chose to ignore them? Why aren't they fighting for me anymore? This is the cruelest and most effective mirror. One they cannot shatter with a clever retort because you are no longer there to hold it up. They are holding it themselves. They expected the familiar chaos of noise, a storm they knew how to weather, but your silence is a deep, unsettling calm that they don't possess the tools to navigate. Your quiet presence, or rather, the profound presence of your absence, is doing what your words never could. It is bypassing their defenses and directly engaging their conscience. It is making them face the version of events that exists without your constant, aching narration. The truth they are starting to glimpse is not the one you were trying to tell them. It is the one they are building for themselves from the rubble of your departed explanations. When you finally stop trying to be understood, you create the necessary conditions for them to finally start realizing what they never tried to understand in the first place. It is an understanding born not from your persuasion, but from their own unguided reflection in the quiet space you courageously created by choosing to say nothing at all. The anatomy of a rupture is often studied in the grand gestures, the slammed doors, the fiery accusations, the tearful ultimatums, but the most profound shifts occur in the quietest of ways. Your silence was never a weapon you sharpened with intent to wound. It was a retreat you made out of sheer exhaustion. You were not trying to make a statement or punish them. You were simply tired. You were tired of the cyclical conversations, tired of the emotional labor, tired of carrying the weight of a connection that felt increasingly one-sided. You went quiet because your well of words had run dry, because every attempt to draw from it only brought up more pain. But from their perspective, this retreat does not feel like fatigue. It feels like a rejection of the most devastating kind. It is not the loud, dramatic rejection of a shouted "I hate you" or a final decisive "we're through." Those are sharp, clean wounds. They hurt, but they are clear in their intent and their boundaries. The rejection inherent in silence is different. It is a quiet, pervasive coldness that seeps into the bones of the relationship. It is the rejection of non-recognition. It whispers, with terrifying finality, "You are not even worth a response." To be angry is to still be engaged. To be sad is to still be connected. But to be met with silence is to be made to feel invisible. As if your very existence has been erased from someone's emotional landscape. For a person who is accustomed to occupying a central starring role in your inner world, this sudden demotion to a ghost is a catastrophic blow to their sense of self. This is where the ego, that fragile architect of self-worth, enters the stage in a panic. The human ego is a paradoxical entity. It can withstand a direct assault, but it cannot survive being ignored. It feeds on engagement, positive or negative. Your anger was food. Your tears were sustenance. Your passionate explanations and desperate pleas were all forms of attention that validated its importance. Your reactions were a form of control it exerted over your emotional state. But silence is a starvation diet. It cuts off the supply completely. There is no validation to be found in it, no reassurance, no proof that they still matter to you. This creates a terrifying emptiness, a void where their ego once thrived. They might perform nonchalance for an audience. They might post curated glimpses of a life moving gloriously onward. But in the quiet of their own mind, your silence is a relentless, gnawing question mark. The lack of your attention becomes the only thing they can focus on. They are not used to being ignored by you. You were their constant, their reliable source of validation. Now, that mirror has gone blank, and they are left alone with a reflection they may not be prepared to see. Their ego begins to crumble, not because you are actively harming it, but because you have removed the scaffolding that was holding it up your constant, devoted attention. They are finally forced to confront a version of you that is complete without them, a version that does not orbit their sun, and in doing so, they are forced to confront the unsettling truth that their own light might not have been as central as they once believed. The pain they feel is not the pain of losing you. It is the sharper, more intimate pain of their own ego confronting its irrelevance. There is a certain script written for heartbreak, a well-worn narrative that everyone expects to play out. They were not just prepared for it, they were likely relying on it. Their entire understanding of your dynamic, perhaps even their own sense of security within it, was built upon a foundational belief that you would always be there to fight for them. They were so certain of your eventual return that your absence now feels like a fundamental law of their universe being broken. They anticipated the reach-out, the text message that appears after a few days of tense silence, its tone a mixture of apology and longing. They imagined the late-night call, the voice thick with emotion, maybe aided by liquid courage, pleading for one more chance, one more conversation. They braced for the emotional social media post, the vague yet pointed lyric or quote designed as a digital flare gun, signaling your pain and your desire for their attention. But you didn't. You did none of it. And in the face of your continued silence, their certainty has curdled into profound confusion. The version of you they thought they knew, the one with a seemingly infinite capacity for forgiveness. The one who always initiated the repair? The one who chased after the connection, even as they walked away from it, has failed to materialize. This time, that person is nowhere to be found. This disruption of their expected narrative is what is truly shaking them. They expected drama, a performance of pain where they could still play a leading role, either as the villain or the redeemer. They expected tears they could either soothe or ignore, a display of need that would reaffirm their importance. But you gave them nothing. You chose peace, and nothing is louder, more deafening, or more disorienting than that choice. Your silence is not the void they mistake it for. It is a presence. It is the presence of your dignity, standing tall and unwavering where your pleading self once stood. It is the presence of your self-respect, finally speaking in a language that requires no words. This shift in you from someone who fought for them to someone who is now protecting yourself is a seismic event that reverberates back through the foundation of your past interactions. It forces them to reread your entire history together through a new, unsettling lens. Perhaps your past forgiveness wasn't weakness, but strength they mistook for convenience. Perhaps your chasing wasn't desperation, but a devotion they became entitled to. Your silence now retroactively rewrites the story, stripping away their preferred interpretation and leaving them with a much more uncomfortable truth that you were always whole and you always had the power to walk away. You simply loved them enough to stay until one day. The cost of staying became the quiet erosion of the very self you were offering. By not breaking, you have shown them that the foundation they thought was solid was in fact built upon your willingness to bend. Now that you stand straight, the entire structure feels unstable, and they are left bewildered in the sudden, unfamiliar stillness. In the immediate aftermath, the quiet can feel like a vacuum, a hollowed-out space where the noise of the relationship used to be. It's easy to misinterpret this stillness as emptiness, a void that signifies loss and absence. But that is a fundamental misreading of the process. This silence is not an end. It is a fertile ground. You are not merely cutting someone off. You are performing the most vital act of reconstruction. You are reconnecting with the parts of yourself that were slowly surrendered in the constant negotiation of love. The peace you are cultivating, which might feel foreign and even unsettling in its simplicity, is not boredom. It is the deep, resonant hum of healing. It is the sound of your spirit finally able to hear its own voice again, without static, without interruption. This is what authentic growth feels like, not a dramatic upward trajectory, but a quiet, steady recentering. It is the necessary consequence of finally ceasing to pour your energy into a vessel that was not only leaky, but refused to acknowledge the source of the water. You are not lost in this quiet. You are becoming. The person being forged in this crucible of silence is not the same person who entered it. That version was defined in relation to another, their worth often contingent on another's approval. The new iteration is stronger, not with the brittle strength of defiance, but with the resilient strength of self-knowledge. They are wiser, not with the cunning of street smarts, but with the profound wisdom that comes from having felt the full weight of a love that was not returned and choosing to lay it down. They are calmer because the internal storm of seeking validation has finally passed, leaving a clear, bright sky in its wake. This new self doesn't need to prove their worth through explanation or achievement. They simply know it, in the same way they know the sun will rise. That knowing is unshakable. They, watching from the outside, likely misinterpret this transformation. They thought your silence meant you had been rendered speechless. You had run out of words because you had run out of value. But the breathtaking truth they cannot yet grasp is that you have simply outgrown the need to be understood by them. You have transcended the very courtroom in which you were constantly pleading your case. To seek understanding from someone who never truly saw you is to beg for a translation in a language they do not speak. Your silence is the realization that the task was always futile. You are no longer seeking a stamp of approval from a faulty institution. You have become the architect, the builder, and the sole inhabitant of your own validation. This chapter of quiet is not the epilogue to your story of heartbreak. It is the gripping preface to your story of self-reclamation. This isn't an ending. It is a homecoming. It is your becoming. So if you are sitting in this silence right now, wondering if the quiet matters, know that it does. Its significance does not stem from the confusion it sows in others, but from the clarity it is building in you. You are not being cold or passive. You are, with immense courage, choosing a profound peace. And in a world that screams for constant reaction, that choice is the loudest, most revolutionary statement you will ever make.